Welcome everyone to Monday Match Analysis. I'm Gill Gross, and it is time for a preview of the 2024 Madrid Masters, the second clay Masters of the year as we inch closer to Roland Garros. Looking for a better performance. I had a tough start to my clay season. Monte Carlo predictions, probably the worst that it will get all year. At least I'm hoping, because it was a bit of a mess. Now, I did have a stroke of bad luck. Literally made the podcast after the draw, after they already started playing. Ended up going with Alcaraz to win the title. Wasn't all that confident on it, but just, went with Alcaraz. And then he didn't play a single point. I was high on Casper Ruud. I wanted to get behind him, but I wasn't going to pick him to beat Alcaraz. I couldn't get that far on that. So that was a bad, unlucky swing in my favor, because I do think I would have put Ruud through to at least the semis, but maybe the final, which would have been nice. But Tsitsipas, that was a misread by me, just based on what he looked like on the hard courts. I just underestimated the effect of that clay reset and coming back to a place where he's played the best tennis of his career at the Monte Carlo Country Club. So, that and the draw was kind of tough on Steph as well. So that was a miss, and I will leave it at that. Took a shot on Francisco Cerundolo. That didn't pay off either. But I am confident. I'm feeling a lot better, I will say, about this particular batch of predictions. I feel like I'm seeing things a little bit clearer here, but who knows? Usually oftentimes that doesn't mean anything. And apologies for the lateness. Once again, I was traveling all of yesterday. So I am doing this. I am recording this. I will post this before the first ball is played in men's singles at Madrid, but it is a little bit later than I like. I have one more thing to say before I get into the quarter-by-quarter preview. Just a reminder to subscribe to The Draw. It is my weekly newsletter that curates the best tennis content on the internet every week. It drops every Tuesday morning. It is not too late to enjoy yesterday's edition. There was some interesting stuff there. We had a great piece on Garbiñe Muguruza, who's retired. We have a stat about Tsitsipas on clay, which will probably blow your mind. If you're confused about why Danielle Collins is retiring, there is a terrific piece by ABC News on that. And Challenger movie, the new Zendaya Challengers movie, which I haven't been able to see yet. I'm really excited to see it, and I'll probably talk about it on the channel. Rave reviews of the movie. So we've also linked some content that is related to the Challengers movie. If you want to subscribe to The Draw, the link is in the description, or you can type in thedraw.tennis. The top seed is Jannik Sinner. He's got Casper Ruud, Grigor Dimitrov, Karen Khachanov, Adrian Manarino, Nicolas Jarry, Cam Norrie, and Jordan Thompson. My dark horse here is Alejandro Tabilo. My upset alert is Grigor Dimitrov. And my early popcorn is Mickelson versus Fonseca in the first round. There were a lot of really intriguing unseeded dark horse options in this quarter. FAA, Mensik, Zhang Zhizhen, who made really the first breakthrough run of his career at Madrid last year. And of course, Joao Fonseca. And I'll talk about a lot of these guys, but I went with Tabilo. He just continues to get results every week. And he's got finals under his belt in Santiago and Cordoba. And those are really the two courts that closely resemble Madrid, other than, Kitzbühel is another, in terms of altitude clay. So, and the Santiago Challenger last year also made the final. So, just sign me up for these conditions with Tabilo. And the only thing that makes me hesitate is I also like Nicolas Jarry here, a fellow Chilean who has won Santiago in the past, and Jarry would be Tabilo's second round opponent. I just think in terms of who's got a chance to make a really big run, I felt like Tabilo, who is really creeping in on seeded territory here, he's 36 in the world. I thought he had the best chance out of everybody. Grigor Dimitrov upset alert. This is purely a draw thing. I'm not really down on Dimitrov coming into this event. His first match is against Jannik Sinner, who has made some noise at Madrid in the past. He's beaten some good players here. Or Jakub Mensik, who I just think is a really dangerous guy in general. If he's going to get things going, I don't know if he's comfortable in these conditions, but if he is, if he beats Jannik Sinner, I just feel like it's a pretty uncomfortable start for Dimitrov. Hasn't loved Madrid either. So here's a stat for you on Grigor. He's been semifinals or better at every Masters 1000 except for Madrid, where he's reached the quarterfinal once. That's it. So it really seems like he doesn't like it here much either. Let's go. Early popcorn. Mickelson versus Fonseca. Next gen battle. But Fonseca to me is the A side in this matchup because, he continues to win at tour level despite his youth, and he is a real frosh out there. He is very green, but his results are already holding up at a high level, and I think really highly of his game. Mickelson at this point is a little bit more experienced, but he's also got a ton of game and a terrific two-handed backhand, a good serve, kind of an all-court game. He can volley. Fonseca, I'm always early popcorn with Fonseca. I'm in kind of my honeymoon phase with him where whenever he's playing, I'm trying to watch. Okay, quarterfinal. Jannik Sinner defeats Casper Ruud. So I almost picked Ruud over Sinner. This was actually not that easy for me to come to because Casper should be in his bag right now after Barcelona. I think confidence he's one of those players where confidence is a really big deal with Casper. There's a huge difference between how he plays when he's not feeling himself and how he plays when he's like, yeah, I'm actually pretty good at this tennis stuff. So I expect him to play really offensive on his forehand and in these lively conditions with the super high bounce, one of the highest bouncing courts of the year. In theory, I really like these conditions for Ruud. And he's also shown that fatigue in terms of going, Monte Carlo final, Barcelona final. Normally he does a good job at not getting worn down. Like he's somebody who plays Geneva before Roland Garros every year. And then he plays the French and usually it doesn't hurt him like I think it would hurt most players. So yeah, this isn't that easy for me, but then another thing is Sinner hasn't passed the third round here in Madrid, although he missed it last year. So small sample size, and he was young in this sample size. All right, why did I go with Jannik ultimately? I think that Sinner has a huge rest advantage, and ultimately I do like that. And his backhand down the line just opens up a lot of stuff for him against Ruud. I think a great backhand down the line, and in general, the ability to attack Ruud backhand and return well against him deep down the middle. I think all of these things are just massive assets that ultimately I think there will be enough tactically for Sinner to lean on in that matchup. So I'm going with Jannik. The 3 seed is Daniil Medvedev. He's got Tsitsipas, De Minaur, Shelton, Bublik, Tiafoe, Korda, and Lehechka. My dark horse here is Hamad Medvedev. My upset alert is Francis Tiafoe. My early popcorn is Darwin Blanch versus Rafael Nadal in the first round. Hamad Medvedev, next-gen final champion last year. I do think that in Jeddah with the really, really quick indoor hard court, the conditions just favored him for some reason so much better than all the other young guys. But I also think that he's one of the best among his age group. If you're wondering what happened to him, because you probably haven't heard his name all year, I actually talked to him in Phoenix, and he got a virus in February that was so bad. He said the name of it. It was way too many syllables for me to comprehend when he said what the virus is called, but he was in bed for a month. So that has really derailed his season. Came through qualifying here. So, I'm assuming this is the first sign that he's coming back to form. He's a big server. He's got a big forehand, and he actually really likes clay under his feet. he's had good clay results, challenger level. Kovacevic, first round, and then Yuri Lehechka. That's a good draw. I really like that draw for Hamad. Francis Tiafoe, my upset alert. He made the Houston final, but he hasn't played since, which I think makes his first couple matches harder. To me, that's a vulnerability. And he might play the guy who beat him in Madrid last year in Pedro Cachin. So he will play either Cachin or who's Offner is pretty uncomfortable to play in these conditions. He serves big and hits big. So, kind of not all that high on Tiafoe this clay court season for many reasons, despite the Houston final. Popcorn match, Darwin Blanch, Rafael Nadal, easiest pick in the world. Nadal at this point, you cherish every match, but also Blanch being a 16-year-old who, is he 17? I think he's still 16. Let me check that. He is obviously an IMG client, therefore he's 16 still. He got a wild card, but the future at this point, it's very, very early, but people certainly think highly of him. He's made 2 junior slam semifinals. He's got big weapons. He has an unconventional path where, yes, he represents the United States, but he hasn't really lived in the U.S. much. And last couple years, he's been at the Juan Carlos Ferrero Academy. So he's gotten, great training, and he's hit with a lot of high-level pros in his very, very young career already. So it's going to be interesting to see how that one goes. Lefty on lefty battle as well. My quarterfinal here is Stefanos Tsitsipas defeats Ben Shelton. Let me address Medvedev first. Obviously, the 3 seed, and I don't have him through here. Daniil, you would think, would prefer this clay tournament over the others just because it's faster, but it never looks that way to me. It has never looked like, Medvedev is better in Madrid than the other clay events. No, not the case. And maybe it's the high bounce. Maybe it's how the sliding feels, because some clay courts, are slightly different in terms of how easy it is to maintain your balance when you're sliding. So that's kind of where I got off of Medvedev. That plus there's a lot of landmines. Korda has always been very tough on Daniil. That is Medvedev's potential third round opponent. His first match, which will be in the second round given the bye, is the winner of Christopher O'Connell and Matteo Arnaldi. That would have been early popcorn had Blanch Nadal not been in the mix here, because those are 2 players who do a lot of interesting things on the court, who really come at you offensively in a way that could be interesting against Daniil. And then, you have not Korda. And then you have Bublik and Shelton, who they're not bad matchups for Medvedev. But if you're going to play Bublik and Shelton at a clay event, this is 100% the one that you don't want to play them. So it's not an easy path for Medvedev. And I decided to look elsewhere to Ben Shelton, who is taking a lot of pride in getting more comfortable on clay. And it's as simple as this. His ball is just going to be really tough to handle here. His serve is going to kick up like a mule, unlike, any serve other than John Isner's that we've seen. I don't think anybody has hit their serve with as much spin as Shelton since Isner. And by the way, John adored this tournament. Like, Madrid was one of Isner's best tournaments throughout his career, because it's just a great event to serve at. And if you have a really heavy topspin forehand like Shelton does, that's also great. So, let's see what Ben can do here. I think he might be able to get to the quarters. Tsitsipas. I don't think this is his best clay tournament, especially since the serve has been the worst part of his game. And something that I certainly do look for when it comes to Madrid is I'm trying to look at guys who serve well. And, of course, on the flip side, when it comes to Tsitsipas's return game. The return can get exposed much easier. Like, we've seen how big it's been for Tsitsipas in Monte Carlo and Barcelona, that when he's standing deep on the return, guys can't really just serve his backhand and rush it as easily as they can on other surfaces. But in Madrid, that dynamic kind of goes away. Suddenly you actually can rush Tsitsipas's backhand return. But I just think the draw that he's been dealt here is just too good to deny, given his confidence. Demon can't take advantage of the return stuff that I'm talking about. And although, Alex beat Tsitsipas in their last meeting, historically it's been a dominant head-to-head for Steph. Lehechka beat Tsitsipas in March at Indian Wells, but Lehechka hasn't played since Miami at all. So I'm not really expecting too much out of Yuri in this tournament, which also, by the way, backs up Hamad Medvedev as the dark horse. And just thinking about Tsitsipas versus Shelton, I just feel like Steph, and I know it's the big serve that Shelton brings against Tsitsipas that can sometimes be dangerous, but Tsitsipas's cross-court forehand angles, in my head, is just going to eat Shelton up. I think somebody who can pull Shelton out wide on the backhand super easily is going to have a recipe for success from the back of the court. So I go Tsitsipas out of that quarter. Let's go to Alexander Zverev's quarter. Top seeds are Hurkacz, Taylor Fritz, Tommy Paul, Sebastian Baez, Francisco Cerundolo, Tomas Martin Echeverry, and Arthur Fils. Dark horse is Lucas Klein. Upset alert is Francisco Cerundolo. And early popcorn is Zverev versus Coric in the second round. Lucas Klein came through qualifying. I saw him for the first time at the Australian Open this year, where he almost beat Zverev. He hits the ball crazy big. He is extremely uncomfortable to play against, and he came through qualifying very easily. So he has my attention here, plus a terrific draw. Fellow qualifier in the first round, Pablo Llamas Ruiz. Tommy Paul would be his second round, who's coming back from the injury, so you just don't know what Paul is going to look like right away. And then his third round seed is Francisco Cerundolo, who's been really inconsistent and also doesn't really bring a serve to the table in these conditions. I like this dark horse. I have some confidence in it. Obviously, there's not much of a track record for Lucas Klein at tour level, but I don't know. I'm kind of feeling that. Francisco Cerundolo is my upset alert. He just can't seem to win a close match. He's lost 5 of his last 6 deciding sets, and it's a big red flag for me, as it's just such a tough blow to a player mentally. The margins are really fine in professional tennis. We know that. Like, you're going to play close matches. Everybody's really good. And so often the difference between being on a tough stretch and being on a winning stretch is just, are you figuring out ways to win, or are you figuring out ways to lose in the end? And for Cerundolo, it's been the bad side of that. He's 0-2 lifetime in Madrid, and he's got to play Fabian Marozsan or former semifinalist here in Madrid, Aslan Karatsev, in his first match. Both mega dangers. Karatsev is just all-out attack, and Marozsan is similar, but I actually favor Fabian, and he's got the easy power and the drop shots and the clay comfortability as well. Early popcorn. Coric, last year's semifinalist. Zverev, let me give you a stat right now about Zverev in Madrid. He has not lost to a player outside of the top 5 in Madrid since 2017. So that's just a high stakes kind of blockbuster match early on that has some extra juice. I mean, I don't give Coric a great chance there, but it's certainly one to keep your eye on. Quarterfinal prediction here is Alexander Zverev defeats Hubert Hurkacz. I got the big servers here in this quarter coming through. For Hurkacz, I just think he can serve his way through this. I mean, I'm super interested in Baez. Not interested in the sense that I think he has a great chance to make some noise. But I'm interested because at some point he should. Like, it's got to be coming, right? You would think. He should be able to do things in these Clay 1000s, but he just hasn't been able to rise to the occasion at big events so far in his career. It's been a strange career that he's had so far, because in terms of his ability to go deep and win titles and make finals at the smaller Clay events has been phenomenal. Anyway, I think Hubie's playing good ball, but Zverev's ability to steal some points with his defense would be decisive in that matchup, in my opinion. He's more dynamic in that facet of the game when he needs to come from behind and steal a couple of points in return games or in tie breaks. That's what I think gives Zverev the edge. Look, conditions are so good for Sasha here. The ball bounces nice and high for him. He moves great, and his serve becomes a really big problem. He never plays well in Munich, by the way. And I've let that fool me before, where he's taken a bad loss in Munich. Sometimes he doesn't play well in Miami either. And I've come to Madrid and I've been like, well, Zverev's not in good form. And I don't predict him to do well. And then he always does great until he plays Alcaraz the last couple of years. And I made a pledge 2 years ago that that's never going to happen again. I'm never going to just be like, okay, Zverev's not in good form, so I'm not going to pick him to do well at this tournament, because he always looked good at this tournament. Finally, we go to Carlos Alcaraz's quarter, the 2 seed. He's got Andrei Rublev, Holger Rune, Hugo Humbert, Jan-Lennard Struff, Talon Griekspoor, Alejandro Davidovich Fokina, and Lorenzo Musetti. My dark horse is the winner of Alexei Popyrin and Mariano Navone. That's a first-round match. I didn't want to pick between those two because I don't know who's going to win it, really, and I think whoever does is the most dangerous unseeded prospect in this quarter. My upset alert is Andrei Rublev. My early popcorn, I couldn't really choose an early match, but the bottom 8th is stacked, and I'll talk about that in a moment. For dark horse, look, I've talked about, I said in Monte Carlo, about how I've really been loving Popyrin on clay since last year. The extra time on his forehand, the runaround footwork is really good. And here he's got the big serve, which is just a bonus. He played well here last year. And Mariano Navone, his first-round opponent, has been a winning machine. Like, unbelievably impressive what Navone has done in his tour career so far. His break percentage this year in tour-level matches is 38%. That's the best in the top 50 by far. And I understand, like, he hasn't played hardcourt tennis, which always drives that number down, but he's beating Alcaraz by about 9 percentage points. Now, Madrid isn't seemingly Navone's like type of clay, if I were to guess, and that's why I think, Popyrin will have a really good chance. Winner gets Holger Rune. You never really know what you're going to get out of him, out of Holger. Like, there's always a chance that he plays a sloppy match. He tends to throw some in sometimes. So, yeah, I think Popyrin or Navone have a pretty good chance here to make some noise. My upset alert is Andrei Rublev. He's lost 4 matches in a row. He hasn't been the same since the Dubai default. I wasn't positive after it happened that it was going to affect his tennis. I thought maybe he'd be able to turn the page, but that hasn't happened. He's struggled a lot, and he's also struggled immensely with Madrid conditions over the years. He hasn't broken serve here in Madrid. The return has not been easy for him. So there's all that. His draw does him no favors. He'll play the winner of Facundo Bagnis and Brandon Nakashima. Facundo is great in altitude clay, and Brandon just beat him in Barcelona. And both of those players came through qualifying, so they're very used to the conditions. Whoever Rublev plays will be on a 3-match win streak. There's going to be a massive gap in confidence in that match. Early popcorn, I said stacked bottom 8th. There are 3 players in the bottom that I really like better than anyone on the top. Struff, Humbert, Alcaraz. all three of those guys, I would love to, like, I'd put them in the quarters if they were, for example, in, Talon Griekspoor or Davidovich Fokina's spot or Runa's spot. Like, you get the point. If they were on the top eighth, I would have put any of those guys through to the quarters. But, that's going to make for some intriguing. And then the other guy is Musetti, who arguably is a fourth guy who maybe I'd put through to the quarters over anybody on the top. But I'm not as confident on that. Yeah, it should make for an entertaining bottom half. Like, could get Alcaraz, Musetti, could get, Struff from Bear, offensive firepower guys in Madrid. Always fun. What I ended up going with, however, is Alcaraz defeating Holger Rune. I just couldn't quite bring myself to go with Popyrin or Navone. Like, I'm going to give Rune the benefit of the doubt here. I still feel like his level has been kind of inconsistent because of how, I think mostly because of the physicality. Maybe like, I don't know if there's a lack of resilience, but sometimes when I think he doesn't feel well, like when he's not feeling well, I think he kind of just lets it go. He lets the match go just based on how many times we've seen, like, he's lost 6-1, 6-1 approximately twice now in the last like month or so, which shouldn't really happen. But anyway, he went 3 sets with Sinner in Monte Carlo. He is winning matches every week. I think the higher bounce is good for him. The conditions could reward his risk-taking a little bit more. So, yeah, I think it's a good draw, and just kind of shrug my shoulders and go with Holger. Alcaraz is coming back from injury, right forearm, and he's got a lot of talent to deal with in his section. So those things are negatives, but this has been the best court on tour for him, winning back-to-back years, along with Indian Wells. And it's kind of for the same reason. The jump off the court is insane. We saw him do that in Palm Springs so well, like that just really heavy, obviously the kick serve, and then that heavy topspin forehand. He can even throw up high, heavy balls with the backhand. And it's really difficult when he has such an easy way to break opponents down just using that heavy RPM on the forehand. And look, as far as the injury goes, there is a really long list of examples where Alcaraz comes back from injuries, usually not too major, and he wins right away. He lifts trophies right away. I can give you 3. And look, the guy's been an elite player on tour for only 2 seasons. And, well, 2 seasons and change. And I can already give you 3, and maybe there's been more. But last year, he misses the Australian Open, comes back and wins Buenos Aires. And then he also misses Monte Carlo with an injury, comes back and wins Barcelona. This year, he's hurt in Rio with the ankle, comes back and wins Indian Wells. So that's like 3 separate times where he's coming off of withdrawals from tournaments and not just playing well on his comeback event, winning his comeback event. It just keeps happening. So what am I supposed to do about that? I mean, I think it would be wise to look at the history and to also just think like, Alcaraz. Well, look, I don't know. It's a forearm injury. Clearly, it was enough for him to miss 2 events. Wanted it to heal fully, but he withdrew late at Monte Carlo. So that tells you like. It's not, and we know this, but it's not as if he like tore a ligament in there or something, right? Like he thought he was good to go, and then he had to withdraw late from Monte Carlo. So I don't know. I'm going to assume he's healthy, and hopefully it doesn't burn me again like it did in Monte Carlo. Speaking of which, my final weekend predictions in 3, 2, 1. I'm going to go Tsitsipas defeats Sinner, Alcaraz defeats Zverev, in 3 sets for each of those. And Alcaraz defeats Tsitsipas in 2 sets, which happens to be my prediction from last year's Madrid. I had Alcaraz over Tsitsipas in my prediction. If I'm wrong again, maybe I'll think twice about Tsitsipas in these altitude clay conditions, but he has made a final here a few years back, I should say. Remember, by the way, last year I didn't mention it. Remember how crazy Madrid was? It was Struff, it was Coric, it was Karatsev. It was just a lot of upsets in Alcaraz, but I haven't noticed that that's a pattern over the years with Madrid. I think last year it was just how it went, just kind of the craziest tournament of the year. It happens. Why did I take Tsitsipas over Sinner? I'm not that high on Jannik. Look, eventually Jannik is going to need to have a little bit of a hiccup. And I know making the semis is not exactly a hiccup, but I even think it could happen before this because it's going to happen at some point this year. And for me, it would make a lot of sense if it happened here. There is not a huge history of Sinner having success in Madrid, although he missed it last year. It's a look-ahead spot with Rome. I talk about this with the Italians. Berrettini has played well in Madrid. The other Italians have played generally really, really poorly in Madrid. If you go through the list, which I did, I don't know if it was last year or the year before, but I just think there is some mental component of feeling like the next week is more important than this week with Rome right around the corner. So those are the main things. It's just if there's going to be one tournament where Sinner just slips up a little, I feel like it's this one. And Tsitsipas, I do think it's, he's a tough one for Sinner. I also think Tsitsipas has a better draw than Sinner because remember, I think Casper is dangerous for Jannik as well. And Tsitsipas plays Jannik well, especially on clay. I feel like where the forehand battle is going to be a little more important, and Tsitsipas can hang with him in that department. So I roll with Steph here, and then Alcaraz over Zverev. Look, Carlitos has just destroyed Zverev in Madrid 2 years in a row now. They've had a weird head-to-head, Zverev and Alcaraz. It's tough to get a read on it. Ultimately, I feel like when Alcaraz is right, when he's making the right decisions, when he's not erratic, when he's not nervous, I think he beats Zverev. I just think that Zverev has done a great job of in intense moments, especially at the slams, right, at Roland Garros and the Australian Open, when Alcaraz is not confident in himself. Zverev does a great job of kind of extracting that out of him because he doesn't give a lot of rhythm on his service games because he can use the big serve well. Get into a lot of the backhand exchange where when Alcaraz is not at his best, he tends to just kind of lack patience in those. And I think it's been more about timing than anything. Now, Zverev fans will come back. They'll say, well, in Madrid, it's been the same thing. Zverev had no sleep 2 years ago. Last year, he was still coming back from the injury. I get all that, and that's why I say it's 3 sets, because I think there's a good argument both ways. But I do think when Alcaraz is at his best, he's more dynamic than Zverev. He beats Zverev. Alcaraz over Tsitsipas in straights in the final. Tsitsipas still needs to prove to me that Alcaraz is not an unsolvable riddle for him. And that's been the case thus far. Kick serve high to Tsitsipas's backhand is the first thing that comes to mind. That just sounds like a nightmare right off the bat. +1 forehands off of that for Alcaraz. And yeah, I will leave it at that. So there you have it. Looking forward to Madrid. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.